Welcome to the video review and bonus materials from Westeros.org for episode 3 of season 5, High Sparrow. For background material, we'll be discussing a bit about Volantis today, and then of course we'll be covering highs and lows separately before we go into our story-by-story coverage of the whole episode.
So, Volantis, the free city of Volantis. I have a feeling we talked about it in the second season because they made Talissa from Volantis. But since then, we've had some new information from George in the book right over here, The World of Ice and Fire, that I thought might be worth sharing. Now, for those of you who missed the second season episode where we discussed it, which I think we discussed it, Volantis is the first and the oldest of the free cities. It is the first colony that the Valyrians made when they were expanded westward. And Volantis is at the mouth of the Rhoyne, the great river, the gigantic river that kind of runs almost the entire length of Essos from north to south. And it was a sort of a trading colony. The idea was to get all the wealth that was flowing down the Rhoyne and be the place that it would then ship out to the rest of the Valyrian holdings and elsewhere in the world. Volantis, for a long time, the Rhoynar were the people who kind of, this sort of river civilization that had developed all along the Rhoyne. You have shades of sort of Mesopotamia. The Rhoynar were among the earliest civilized cultures. For a long time, Volantis kind of lived peacefully with the Rhoynar. But eventually, conflict started to develop between them. In particular, George revealed all sorts of wars, including the First Turtle War, the Second Turtle War, and these wars were ones where sort of the Rhoynar worshipped Old Man Turtle and Mother Rhoyne. Mother Rhoyne and all these sort of minor gods, including the Old Man Turtle, and they had sacred turtles, sort of like, I don't know, I suppose Hindus sort of hold cows to be sacred or something. But some Volantine killed some turtles, and that eventually led to breakdown relationships, and you had conflicts going over centuries, until finally the Rhoynar couldn't take any more of a trouble that Volantis was bringing. Now, Volantis, like the other colonies, were kind of semi-independent of Valyria. They were their own. You have to look at George is obviously borrowing from sort of the Greek colonies. They were affiliated. They have origins sort of from Athens, but they were their own cities. They were their own places. So there was
I wonder if Volantis might not compare quite well with Syracuse, for example, which was a very rich Greek colony, in fact, much richer than the Greek motherland, and became sort of one of the jewels in the expanded colony empire of.
No, totally possible, something like that. So Volantis ended up. Garin the Great, a Rhoynish prince. Each city had its prince among the Rhoynar, and they were sort of affiliated. Again, they were these sort of city-states. He convinced many of the other city-states that they had to go to war and root out these Volantines once and for all. And a huge army was assembled to go and fight, and sweeping away sort of smaller Valyrian outposts and towns, winning great battles. But
there was a particular, wasn't there, a dragon lord being killed as part of...
I can't quite quote exactly what detail about that, but what does happen is the Volantine terrified call for help from Valyria, and Valyria answered with an enormous response. Hundreds of dragon lords and dragons. And against that, there may have been 1 million men, so the stories go, in the Rhoynish army, and they had water mages who could raise water spouts and cause, the river to jump its back and flood the ground. The water spouts, all that magic was not sufficient against the amount of fire and death from above that the Valyrians were able to create. 1 million men died is how it goes, and Garin the Great was held a prisoner and caged in the ruins of his city, and where he allegedly speaks a curse that leads to something we can discuss maybe for next episode, actually.
Yes,
Does
I
it come
think
up
that.
then?
I think it will come up.
Well, it actually does come up in this episode now that I think about it. But fourth episode says more, so we'll save it for that.
Better.
Since then, Volantis is the great free city next with Bravos. They are two sort of, and they're kind of on opposite parts of Essos. They are rivals in some ways.
They're undisputedly in control of the trade of the Rhoyne there in that sense, where it's passing through and.
There's a lot more in the books about Volantis because Volantis plays a much more significant part in the story than it does in Game of Thrones, the TV show. And this, in our review for last episode, I thought that removing a lot of the geopolitical aspect was an obvious method to cut down time and also cost, because Volantis in the books, has a navy and has an army but gets involved in events, and they can't show all these.
And we see a lot more about the internal structure of Volantis, which is very much
hinted at here.
It's hinted at, but I think we see it more clearly. There's no sign, for example, it's a divided city.
Yeah, the bridge doesn't really sell the idea that there's a divide. Yeah. Like I am a little disappointed that they didn't give it the sort of the Marine Bravo treatment, give it a full on. I believe the shot we see is basically a sort of CGI'd composite image of the Spanish town of Salamanca, which is an old history. It's a nice place. And the bridge they use, obviously the actual bridge does not have all those structures on it, but it's, I believe, the Roman bridge at Salamanca, I think it's called. So it's much grander, it's much bigger. The long bridge that we see here is not very long. The real long bridge is like a mile long, and it spans this huge river, and it's I think it's made of Valyrian black stone, and it's
the whole inner city of Volantis is surrounded by
a huge
black wall of this magically fused black stone, and I believe we brought this up when we were talking about Talisa being a noble from Volantis, and that she was mixing with commoners, because the nobles of Volantis are of very pure Valyrian stock. Aka they should be looking like Daenerys, all of them, plus purple eyes and all of that, which they didn't do on the show. And they keep themselves very much apart from the slaves.
The old blood.
The old blood is, you can't become a part of them just through marriage, for example. They're very strict about.
Yeah.
And they have a very complex political system.
Yeah, with the triarchs and elections, and they had a whole, when in the books, when characters are in Volantis, there's it's campaign season, basically, and there's people going around with signs and crying out for their chosens.
Which would have been an interesting contrast to, obviously, Westerosi.
It would have been nice to have. It would have been nice
I understand that they can't put that in, but it...
But that's kind of gives a little picture of Volantis. It's much more complex, the whole free cities and Valyria.
There's a lot of history there that ties into how all of them interact, what they look like today, their sort of population makeup, what sort of ruling systems they have, what sort of religions they have, all of that. It's very much tied to its history.
So The World of Ice and Fire covers some of that. A Dance with Dragons, if you were reading the books, that's the book that really says a lot about it. And also, if you go to the wiki of Ice and Fire, or the wiki that we have on our website, and you don't mind being spoiled a little bit about what happens in the books, but as I said, they're going very differently in direction, so it's kind of a moot point. You can learn a lot about sort of what the editors have put up there for what you can learn about Volantis. So, highs and lows. I think maybe we should start with our low first, because I think the high is going to surprise people.
Yes, it's sort of a high in one aspect. But yes, let's start with the low point, and this would have to be the scene with the High Septon in the brothel. Come on.
Come on, David and Dan.
Yeah, like nuances. No, yes, we realize that they want to play up a conflict between the corrupt faith,
venal faith,
but they're not quite that, at least not what we see in the books. There is nothing like that you can lay at the feet of the High Septon in particular.
No, but, we have several High Septons in the course of novels. The first High Septon is a very fat, gluttonous man. Yeah. He's a glutton.
He gets torn apart by the mobs during the riots.
Yeah. The next High Septon is implied very strongly that, Tyrion has a direct hand in his selection, and he is a wispy little old man who's just he's a pushover. He does what Tyrion wants him to do.
I don't think he visits brothels with
and in the novel he dies in his sleep That's how it's presented. And then part of it is there's a whole political thing about who's going to become the next Exception. And
the guy's in his sleep, and nobody among the characters had anything to do with that, right?
What? No. But anyways, for me, it's the fact that they just it's such it's so.
It's just an excuse to squeeze in more porn actresses that don't mind being naked, and especially so you can get a really gratuitous crotch shot.
Look, I am not a prude. I like looking at naked women as much as the next person.
Are you sure? Because the next person is me, which probably means that you like looking at naked women a bit more than the next person.
Well, you're the person next to me. You're not the next person.
I'll have to find out who the next person is. Then.
I don't know, but it's hard to take the show with any seriousness when they.
I mean, that was True Blood level. That was beyond. That was Spartacus levels.
Yes, it was kind of just sleazy and kind of like. Yeah. And again, I just go back to that anecdote from Neil Marshall, where there's a producer on the, I'm pretty sure an executive producer on the production who tells directors like, I want you to make sure the perverts are happy. And I don't like the feeling of the thinking behind that. I said I don't mind looking at naked people. I just it feels like it's very
That is HBO saying, hey, look what we can do that the other American channels can't. Well, now a lot of them can, but it is still sort of, this is HBO. We can have all the sex and violence we have, and we want you to really notice it. So just look.
Sure. I mean, there have been, I think, creators from HBO or who have said, I mean, interview after the shows were done, so like, there is the logic of it because we can, we ought to. Like, there's a pressure, like, you really should make use of the full range of what of entertainment.
There aren't any censors.
There aren't any censors. It just felt so gratuitous and so
wrong in terms of that it removes any subtlety about the political conflict.
That's the other thing, because the other thing is a broader point about the whole High Sparrow and things like that. We'll discuss it. I do miss a lot, but there's
no nuance to it.
Well, it's not just a nuance. It's the fact that it doesn't have depth.
No. Well, that often goes along with nuance.
The depth of it is that in the books, George managed to build a really lovely picture of a sort of a realistic
popular movement,
religious based, that makes sense, but is a response to the horrors of the war. Because the fact is, when you look at King's Landing now, for example, I mean, other than the fact there's beggars, there are always beggars and hungry people. That's the thing. It looks the same as it was in the first season. There's no sense of the general populace being fatigued and angry and hungry, and but the place is overly packed with people who are still refugees. Like the refugee situation, they haven't really touched on it since I guess the second season. So they're losing some of that, and I can understand it's time and so on. But it is something like a lot of people have complaints about Feast for Crows on various levels, and I think the thing that a lot of them don't want to acknowledge, don't want to discuss, is how unified it is thematically, how it really has a focus and has a strong a point of view. And when you boil it, when you strip away, I don't like all this stuff, you're stripping away the point of view, and you're just leaving sort of plot action, and you're not necessarily meeting the book on the same level that it's trying to talk to you. It's my feeling. Now you could say,
it follows a book with a lot of action, and it kind of takes the consequences of that. What happens after all of that action? There's going to be an aftermath, and the aftermath isn't going to be as action-filled. But George obviously felt that it was important to show the aftermath, to show everyone's reactions, and that's not just point of view characters. It's also showing society and what has happened to it.
So I the
replacing that sort of more subtle and deep movement with just
here's TNA, here's some pubes.
Yes, apparently all of the septons in King's Landing are regular brothel visitors, so of course we have to do something about that.
So that is definitely, I think, the low point for me. Now the highs are going to surprise people, because I have to say,
story-wise, it's like, what we have the fuck?
We have qualms about it. We'll discuss later, but let's just focus on why we call this the high for us. Yes. Sansa and Littlefinger looking at Moat Cailin and Littlefinger revealing his plans.
Yeah. The acting is really good.
This is probably the best thing Aidan Gillen's done since the first season, I think.
It's not overdone in any particular way.
Sophie Turner's great emotion and sort of the strength. I can't complain. It was really well written.
Yeah.
It was well acted. Again, we have qualms and we'll discuss those because we have they're big qualms. So
wall size. I
don't want to seem like we're being short-sighted. Because this is an awesome scene. It's okay. I have big problems with it. They're combining certain storylines all into one thing.
I mean, I think that the reason that I don't have a problem with the acting, I know that a lot of people felt like, for example, in the first season, they loved the Robert Cersei heart-to-heart talk, which would, never ever happen in the books. And people said, well, the acting is great. Well, I didn't think it was particularly stunning, but it was so wrong for the characters, is my feeling. Here, Sansa is acting like Sansa.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I could buy that Littlefinger. I could buy that he would be sincerely convincing, at least. Whether he's actually sincere, that's another question. But then again, we have that question in the book about his actions as well. So
exactly,
this fit in terms of how they acted. It fit the characters. Then, as we shall see later, in terms of the plan
and how they get to it is sort of that's where our problem is, isn't it?
But it was a well-acted scene, and the characters felt like the actual characters.
No, it felt like the actual characters, and it really felt... I mean, I was really happy to see Gillen dialing down the grandiose...
Yes.
And really going in and, I think when he brought it down to be able to kind of directly communicate to her and really intensely, I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was great. People have been complaining about how his accent's been varying, and we've talked about how just overdone he's been as Littlefinger a lot of the time. But a lot of people were very excited when he got cast because he is an excellent actor. He's done some very fine work. He can continue to do it. And it seemed like he was just struggling to find the right voice. And I think finally, at least on the one-on-one scenes like this, he's found...
I think maybe part of the accent going all over, I've sort of been thinking in that direction, that maybe that is him trying to play Littlefinger as projecting a different way of a completely false way of speaking.
Sure, and to different people, and that with Sansa, he's being more at least seeming to be more genuine and less like I need to show off, and more like I'm a person, I'm talking to you about things that are important. So I'm very happy with the scene as written. We have qualms, and we're definitely going to get into this. But that is our high. I know people are going to be really shocked and surprised because it is such a huge departure.
I guess we can give an honorary mention as well to the Wall again.
Because the Wall again has still... I do miss a couple little bits that they got, but for the most part,
it's the most solid area.
With Brienne not being here this time around, it is definitely, I think, the most solid bit of storytelling that they've got in this episode. Before we go on to next, I'll say overall, this episode is definitely a step up from the prior two, in the way that it has less that I would consider really objectionable. Less stuff is bad. It has less somewhat less time wasting. There's a couple places where I think maybe they could have trimmed a little, but for the most part, they're telling a story. Every story has some meaning and is getting you somewhere. It's not just introducing things anymore. You're actually getting some forward motion. And there's there's lovely character moments, and then there's some overall things that don't work so well. But on the whole, it's a step up. But now we're gonna discuss character story. Now we start up with Arya in the House of Black and White. I thought visually it looked good. It wasn't quite as crowded as with idols. That's fine. I mean, there's a lot of gods in there.
It's like a warehouse for gods.
A warehouse for gods. But visually it's great. The scene is sort of compressing various details from a couple of chapters, the scenes we have there, but it does it well. The one thing I can't quite get around is, what do we call the female servant? Because she's obviously playing the role of the waif, but she doesn't look very waifish, especially compared to Arya, so I don't quite know. In the novel, the waif is a servant of the House of Black and White who sort of has a role in teaching Arya.
As a mentor, sort of.
As a mentor. And she's called waif because she's tiny. She looks like a girl, a young girl, but in fact, that is the result of a poison that was used on her that almost killed her, and has basically stopped her sort of, going through puberty and things. Like, she's just perpetually girlish. Even in her old age, she'll be
very interesting poison.
It's a strange poison. It's a fantasy, but so that's why she's the waif. And here it doesn't quite work. So I don't know. I should ask someone, like, what do they call her? How is she credited? Yeah. Maybe she's called the waif. What's called the waif? But I thought it was good. Yeah. It captured a lot of good things. The jacket interaction, the no one, and the real key of it, these scenes, is Arya's going out and divesting herself of Arya Stark, throwing away her clothing, throwing away the coins,
the sword.
But the sword, needle. Then that was a lovely moment. Maisie's holding it, and she's looking at it, and she's thinking, and you can see that she's almost in tears, and she can't. That's the one thing that she won't give up. So in the back,
and which is, I mean, in the books, it's really, because all of her chapters in A Feast for, I mean, it's a very interesting way that the way they are done in A Feast for Crows and in A Dance with Dragons. They switch chapter titles all the time. I mean, Arya,
after the first two, and actually after this moment in the book, then she starts being, cat of the canals and so on.
So she's the idea is there's a lot about identity, and there's a lot about what can she hold on to, what should she hold on to, and the problem, of course, the scary part is that the one part of Arya that she's holding on to is the sword.
Yeah.
The vengeance, the
violence of it, yes.
There's also obviously the connection to Jon, so it's interesting that kind of play.
Actually, this reminds me of something about, speaking of vengeance. I mean, one thing we didn't address, and I noted it, we just didn't think of discussing it, is Arya's list has shortened quite a lot between the previous season and this.
Without anyone actually.
Melisandre, Gregor, there were a few other characters, Ilyn Payne, they were all on the list, and now it's been boiled down to, I believe, Meryn Trant and Cersei, and I forget who else is the person she had on the list.
Was it Roose Bolton?
Roose Bolton, I don't know. I don't remember. Lannister, maybe. I don't know. She.
But yeah, she definitely.
And that's a weird thing. That's another thing worth asking if anyone gets an interview with one of the writers, asking like why. I feel like they've decided, you know what, we're not going to be able to go through the consequences of that list. And then it's awkward for her to have, which is odd because I don't know that, in the books that. She's certainly not going to be responsible for killing all of those people. No. That's not going to work out for her. Just because you have a list does not mean that you've got to.
But maybe they somehow feel that it has to be sort of obtainable, and that goes very much against George's vision for the books, because there's a vengeance. No, you don't always get it.
And that's really all I have to say about that. I'm pretty happy. It was
I think they're doing a good job there of compressing it and getting the mysterious feel for it, and I like that better than what they did before with the introduction of it.
The introduction was artificially padded out. It didn't feel right. This is a lot better. Next we'll talk. I think we'll call this Tommen and Margaery, because I think Cersei we should deal with sort of separately because her story goes into So the wedding of Margaery and Tommen, it's very straightforward. The wedding night.
It feels a bit modern. Is my big complaint about their interactions in a sense.
The thing about Natalie Dormer being cast in all these period pieces is she doesn't feel to me very period. She didn't feel to me like she was the natural choice for.
No. There were some bits about the Tudors, perhaps. I think that the executions. Scene sort of maybe,
but this is she. There are people where you see when you feel like this is, even though in your head like all these people are, like people in the past kind of look like we do. I mean, they had different standards of beauty, but they more or less look. They had the same genetics more or less. There would be people who, but there's something about some people where you just come up and they just feel very modern. And
I think it's a more way of perhaps how they carry themselves, how they act, and. She comes across as she should be on Sex and the City, maybe.
Well, certainly the scene with the handmaidens later certainly felt like a girl talk, giggly. It felt very out of place. That's a writing issue. That's not her fault. That's a writing thing.
Well, unless they're writing to... Because, I mean, her Margaery and the whole... it was fluffy, the Tommen scene, and it felt a bit modern. Then obviously it makes sense that they have her starting to try and manipulate him.
Sure, my problem is that he's so deer in headlights. He's so easily manipulated. Like he feels like a plot device. Like they have to have a king, but they'll just make him completely stuck between these two people.
Yeah, why did they age him up? In that case,
it could just maybe because they couldn't get the scene where she's half naked putting on her robe.
Yeah, I suppose so.
I don't know.
Because I mean, why not keep...
It's because child actors they're...
Well, okay, but they could have gotten someone who could pull off playing quite a bit younger, so they didn't have to go through the whole, she's manipulating him through sex, and then having him still be, by all appearances, very passive. Well, apparently not in bed, but... It's not strange that he'd managed 4 times. It was probably like 5 seconds apiece.
Oh, he did comment with how fast it was. So it felt weird. Now and then we're kind of, should I cross this into Cersei?
Yeah, let's
cross it into Cersei. And we're then you have the other side of where Cersei's walking with Tom and she's taking jabs at Margaery a little, not so very subtle. He looks like he can tell, and he very clumsily tries to get her to go away, and then she figures out, okay, it's Margaery. And I like the scene that followed in the sense that...
The concept of it. Because it does happen in the books.
Are we really talking Cersei as well? We're just going to go straight through to Cersei here?
Yes, I think we should.
Okay, then what I was going to say is the real problems I have with Cersei as is on the show. I have a lot of problems with Cersei on the show. Okay, it's not the same character, and I'll never quite accept, especially when this season is the one where her character became a point of view.
Yeah,
it makes it so much starker.
Yeah,
the difference. Really. But the other thing is in the first 2 episodes it was the Cersei and Jaime show, and that show is so topsy-turvy. And it requires such a stretch from the writers to get those characters to where we're putting them, particularly Jaime.
What they were calling them on the forum.
Some people think it's calling him Larry and Carol because they're not Jaime and Cersei, so they're calling him Larry and Carol. And it's Jaime. To me, it's Jaime more even than Cersei. I mean, Cersei, they've had 4 seasons of having her being not Cersei. Jaime, however, was kind of Jaime, and then suddenly. He's not. Suddenly he's doing things that are completely opposite where you know what a character would do.
Yeah.
And so it highlights it for me how wrong and how different Cersei is, and in a way that I wasn't happy with. With him out of the picture now, it's a little easier to digest, personally. I don't think it's... So when she comes in, and the concept is great, she's going in as a test. How is Margaery behaving now that she has Tommen wrapped around her finger? And Margaery... I don't think
it's a finger, but...
Well, it's not him wrapped... anyways.
Sorry. Actually, I really don't want to go there.
No, but how she acts... And we see how she acts. She takes, in front of the handmaidens, smiling to Cersei's face, jabs at Cersei about the drinking and various things. She, the queen mother business... She's very overconfident. She's overplaying her hand, and Cersei. So I can buy Cersei doing that. Now the way she goes about it with the meek act and like, oh, you've won, you've got Tommen now, and I've lost all power, so I'm just here to help.
That just seems so wrong. But she would have been, the Cersei of the books would have been smiling through it with teeth.
Yeah, she would have been very chipper. And,
yes.
And he doesn't play that, so we don't do it. But it feels...
It feels like they are going...
It's back to the eyebrow wrinkle. It's the eyebrow wrinkle school of acting.
Yeah. And I mean, there is a time and place for that, which we shouldn't touch because that's spoilery. But yeah, I wasn't happy with seeing that way of her dealing with Margaery's sort of crowing over her success with Tommen and feeling like she's extremely confident about her position. It didn't seem like Cersei at all to react in that sense. And for me, it feels like they're trying, even though it's obviously an act from how she looks when she walks out of there, it still feels like they're trying to score sympathy points to some extent, softening her up all the time.
Maybe maybe they are. By having her played that way,
it feels like that to me, but because they do it so often.
They do so often, yes.
And the thing that we hinted at at the start there, we're going. We have her confrontation with the High Septon, and then her conversation with the High Sparrow, and in the books, well, the reason that she has a talk with the High.
Oh yeah. Okay, let's move on to them in proper order, because after this is there's the High Septon thing,
which we won't talk anymore about.
And then
horrible.
He goes to the small council. There's not really anything to discuss there. He just says he wants an execution.
Yeah.
And then the High Sparrow scene, and as I said, in the book, all of this stuff from the popular movement to the election of a High Sparrow happens without Cersei or anyone really having any control over it. It happens. It is a popular movement. The High Septon is dead. The election.
Well, she does have something to do.
Well, she has, but she doesn't have nothing to do with him being. She assumes.
No, but I'm saying that's part of the whole softening up Cersei. That she doesn't.
Fine. Yes. Yeah. In the book,
she murders
that High Septon because Tyrion picked him, and now she's paranoid about Tyrion, and she's getting rid of all his allies and that she can, and so the High Septon gets murdered. And we only find this out later on that it was something which she arranged. He just died previously in sleep. In fact, she had one of the Kettle Blacks smother him while he was sleeping with a pillow.
Yeah.
So yes, she has a much more direct, and it's her paranoia. Like she was cleaning a house and she's getting rid of people that are tainted by Tyrion. And here, but what she ends up doing in her short-sighted way as well. Now, she assumes that the faith will just pick one of her corrupt, most devout, and it's business as usual. She doesn't reckon on the fact that the city has been filled with these religious zealots who have sort of come bearing the bones of martyrs to show, that the crown has failed to protect its people, but the faith itself has been assaulted. Septs and septries and mother houses have been burned and looted. Septas and acolytes have been raped and murdered, and so it's this big movement that comes in, and on that feeling of almost sort of a Lutheran Protestant, clean out the house, throw out the venal and the corrupt faith. Yeah. You have the High Sparrow sort of, and the High Sparrow is, mind you,
venal and corrupt in this case does not, as far as we know, include frolicking with 10 naked prostitutes. I mean,
it's 6 naked prostitutes because they were representing the 7.
Oh well, there were 7 actually, because there was one for the stranger too. That's one of the ones he
No,
picked.
Because he was playing the father. Oliver was playing the father, so there were 6 women.
Oh yeah, well,
I counted to make sure, because I was wondering, was he offering himself? Because he offers, which of the 7 do you want to worship? Right. And presumably he could mean the High Septon goes both ways. I don't know.
Yeah,
but in any case,
yeah. But anyway, venal and corrupt. I'm sure there were some of them that were visiting.
But the High Septon particularly wasn't. I mean, yes. And they were more concerned with just the failure to
protect and take care of the common people and being too much in the pocket of the nobles. And
so you have, and then that's a surprise to Cersei. And then when she goes there, it's like she just has to accept the fact this is now a High Septon. She has something she wants from him. In the book, she wants him to forgive the debts of the crown. I mean, that's one of the aspects they've dropped as well, the debts of the crown. The monetary side of things is sort of, so far, has not been part of the story. And in return,
he bargains, being, completely out of money.
He bargains hard in the books, and we'll discuss that next episode.
Yeah.
But it's a very different dynamic between them. Yeah. Here, yes, I can see what you're saying. They're playing him off as much more benign.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, he did this thing to the High Septon, but we just showed the High Septon being just completely disgusting, so maybe...
So he seems like a perfectly, for the most part, reasonable
friendly,
fellow.
nice, sweet fellow.
Yes, you get a sense of it when he says that it's never pleasant to lance or boil, that the fanatic edge is there.
But on the other hand, he says, maybe the blade was too short, as in he's meaning his people, maybe they went a bit overboard how he did it.
So he seems quite reasonable. It's not strange that Cersei would think that he's somebody that...
Who would be super grateful if she helps him become in charge of things and all that. And that's not the dynamic in the.
Which means that it's not strange that she would not be fooled by.
What you're saying, you're saying you're not strange. It's not strange. You're saying they're whitewashing and they're mitigating her. They're making it so it's not her fault.
Yes.
Right, and there's perhaps a bit of that. They don't.
There's always a bit of that.
So the scene itself, Jonathan Pryce. I loved. Yeah. Great. He was fantastic. I loved him in it.
I mean, it's not the same character by any means. I think
he comes off very differently. The one has in the book has sort of holy zeal. He's on a mission.
Yeah.
A mission from the gods.
Should have come across more. I mean,
a little bit more. He's
intense.
He's intense and stern. He's not Francis of Assisi.
No.
Whereas this guy comes off as a Francis of Assisi.
He's more of a Thomas More, perhaps. Or
that's not the choice I would make.
I'm religious zealot's not my forte.
No, I'm sure that somebody could come up with something.
Well, I was thinking about how they were depicting him in Wolf Hall, perhaps a little bit more of the zealotry and the hair shirts and the whole thing, and
maybe
he does do hair shirts, doesn't he?
Feel free, anyone who knows their sort of 15th, 16th century religious history can toss up a suggestion of someone who fits the.
But he's definitely a hair shirt kind of guy.
Yeah, sure. Let's move on then, and I guess we'll be going to Winterfell.
Yeah.
So Winterfell, I guess we'll take all of Winterfell together here.
Yeah.
The first bit is just basically seeing Winterfell being rebuilt, and Roose discussing with Reek, the flaying of Lord Cerwyn and his brother and his wife. Departure for the books. In the books, young Lord Cerwyn is actually killed outside of Winterfell by Ramsay and his troops, among others who were gathered by Roderick Castle to kind of besiege the place. They got rid of all that, but also Lord Cerwyn was a boy. He was like 15. Yeah. His father died
he is now a boy, but then he's very much alive.
Yeah, now he's very much alive. I guess it's the same one. So they didn't kill Lord Cerwyn at the Green Fork.
Yeah.
Or rather, he died at the Green Fork, whereas it was, and then Clay Cerwyn, his son, died. So now I guess instead he dies in Winterfell with his wife, or in Castle Cerwyn, his wife. Okay. Anyways, and you just get the picture of how Ramsay and Roose, and also particularly when Ramsay explains, and then Roose says, you didn't have any choice then. Like, one thing they do, they soften him a little bit. They show all this building going on in the book. When the Boltons move into Winterfell, there's squatters in the ruins, and he basically rounds them up, and he says, I'm going to hang you unless you go around, rebuilding the castle, working free labor to fix the castle. And if you do that, I'll show you mercy. And some of them refuse, and he kills some of you, and then the rest kind of do what he says. And then when they're done, kind of repairing like the gates and some of the important, he shows them mercy. He hangs them, but hey, he doesn't flay them, so he was true to his word.
Yes.
So you don't quite see that.
But you do see the interaction here, I guess, again, that they've established last season, that he sort of, as he tries to keep a little bit of a rein on.
Yeah.
Ramsay not being unnecessarily wasteful with resources and such.
Yeah.
So he tries to get him to pay attention and be.
Then it's time, they have to make an alliance. Marriages are the best way to make alliances, and he's found the perfect girl.
And this is where your eyes start going, huh?
Okay, because then sometime later we have the arrival at Winterfell of Littlefinger and Sansa, and the first thing is, you can imply it, you can read it in what Roose says to Ramsay, that you're marrying Sansa Stark, not you're marrying Elaine Stone.
Yeah.
So that's the first kind of like they're just gonna go out there like, here's Sansa, even though Varys or Qyburn or someone is bound to hear about the fact that hey, Littlefinger snuck away with Sansa. This is like a huge, and the way information travels, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. It's like they're gonna know in a couple of days.
Yeah.
So what in the world is going on? So that's the first thing, but it's acted well. The little look, the silence where Roose greets her and as Lady Sansa, and Sansa stares at him for a while, and then kind of affects a smile and curtsies and is gracious and polite, and you can see. So that's cool.
Also a nice touch, I suppose, having the
servant.
The servant, the North remembers.
An important line from Dance of Dragons. People love that line. It was
some
a nice
things
touch.
that probably are going to disappear. So I can say.
I think the basic idea is going to disappear. I think people when I look at forums, and places that people discuss, and there are people who love the books, they love the show, and they basically try to say, well, okay, but they're going to work in this book element eventually, right? I'm sure of it. So people are convinced we're going to see their quote-unquote Grand Northern Conspiracy play out on the show. I don't believe in the Grand Northern Conspiracy, first off, but it's not. They don't have the lords. They're not introducing all these lords. They're not introducing these various factions in the North. They're just not. They don't have the time. They don't have the money. I can't blame them.
There's going to be elements boiling down into this story.
There'll be little nods, like the North remembers. I don't imagine that the end of this episode of this season is going to end with the Northerners who have been rebuilding Winterfell and have been under the Bolton suddenly rising up and carrying Sansa onto the Stark high seat and saying the Queen in the North. It's not happening. It's not.
No.
So it's a nice little line. It's a little, but it's not.
It's a bit of
it's a nod.
Little breadcrumbs.
It's a nod. It's a nod to say. I think. Maybe it'll surprise me, and we'll find out that lady's ready to go and cut Rooster's throat. I don't think so. But then you have Littlefinger and Ramsay talking. That's the one that really kind of. That's the what the fuck to me, because well, to me, when he said, "Oh, I don't know anything about you," like, okay, wait a second. So this is again stupid Littlefinger, the one we had in the second season, who taunted Cersei to her face and was shocked when she said, I could just kill you right now, Stupid Littlefinger who basically is taking this gamble and he knows nothing about Ramsay. Like, he's a guy who generally does his due diligence. Like, in the book, when he kills Lysa, he has a plan. And the show, he doesn't. And we're kind of like...
And in the books, hasn't the rumors spread, at least in the North?
Ramsay is much more widely known. Yeah. Now, they have, on the show, I will give them credit for this, they've made it seem like Ramsay is a complete unknown for the most part. But he has now been...
Littlefinger even says that it's unusual that I don't know anything about a lord.
Yeah. But here's the thing. He now have him running around, flaying alive Lord Kerwin, and making his son watch. There's no one, but when they're passing through the North, who might have had a report of this. There's no idea, but maybe I should go and ask around. I don't buy it. I don't like this Littlefinger. I don't like the Littlefinger who's such an idiot. I understand why we're merging the Jane Poole storyline, although I have deep qualms.
Yes, I don't like it.
I don't like it. I understand why we're doing it.
They're going... Sansa is in the books,
completely different place.
This is a completely different place. This is... Maybe she will end up back in the North at some point. I have my doubts about that. I don't know that she will ever return to Winterfell. Maybe there's a storyline that will take her there. Not in this way. So I have huge problems with them deciding to do this storyline like that with Sansa instead. But then also having the characters act out of character to accomplish getting them from point A to point B.
I have deep qualms about how this is going forward. I saw someone raising a really interesting point. Again, we're going to go spoilers here for A Dance with Dragons. When Jane Poole marries Ramsay, it is a horror show, start to end. It is, and I know we're not going to quite go as far, but they're going to go. They're perfectly capable of going quite far. Yeah. Horror shows start to end, and people said, well, people are complaining about it's because they're minimizing Jane Poole. She's also a young girl. She's of the exact same age. Why is it kind of okay for Jane Poole to have gone through it, and then we say, well, it's not okay for Sansa to go through with it? And I can kind of see the perspective. And to me, it's sort of... For me, it's partly the feeling that fidelity to a novel tells me that if they go this route, Sansa is going to be irrevocably changed from any kind of path George is trying to put her on. And so that to me is, I think, more my objection. Like, this is such a... I'm not minimizing it all. What Jane goes through is horrifying, and if Sansa goes through it, it's all equally horrifying. But it changes Jane's story that is the story. And Sansa, I mean, George has a...
They can't just take that element from Jane's story and then put Sansa back on whatever path she's
supposed to be.
No.
You can't... if they try that, and they've done some of this in the past where they've tried to have their cake and eat it too, where they've had characters do something radically different and then have them still act the same afterward. Like, if they try to do that, that will be a huge mistake. Hopefully they won't, but at the same time, it means like there's this massive difference. And, you know, George hinted... And I when people ask me, you know, George said, you know, I just came up with this idea for something. I haven't really thought about it before.
A big twist for a character.
But they can't do on the show because they've gone a different direction. Yeah. They've done something that precludes it. And, you know, when I was asked, who could it be? I mean, one of the names that popped up immediately was Sansa.
Yeah.
Because they're doing such a radically different story. And George has seen the outline. He knows the basics of what they're doing this season. He could have said, there's no way we're going to be able to do this with that change to a story. And it's not, I mean, some people say, oh, he's doing it because of he's acting like a little kid and now deliberately changing it. George knows that fans have figured out certain things, like important things about his story.
Change that.
He hasn't changed it. He's not.
But we also know that he sometimes gets big ideas that
come quite late.
Yes, that's how he does things. So it's not a surprise.
Yeah, he's a gardener. He's a gardener, not an architect. So.
And I think maybe he brought it up in the interview just to show that, you know, just because I put them on a path, just because I told them certain things, that doesn't mean that there won't be radical changes because I change my mind all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the little...
And then the craziness there of the message from Cersei that we see Cersei sending, going down to Qyburn and having him send. And then apparently it goes...
To the Eyrie.
In the span of this episode, it goes from King's Landing to the Eyrie and then by rider from Eyrie to from the Eyrie to Winterfell.
I mean, you can say, well, it must have been some days, but I mean, the Westeros is just, I keep coming back to it, they've just made it super small. Super small. And I don't like
I think it is the size of Westeros now.
Westeros, for those, like, is it even a city? Is it a town? Or a very small city?
It's a town.
It's a town in Sweden, so, yes. Yeah.
The scale fits better.
All right, we covered Winterfell. Reek, we'll briefly touch on. No lines at all from Fionn. He's listening, he's observing, he's hiding from Sansa. It's great. It's a great way to show that he's around and present, but also kind of broken and fearful. But it'll be very interesting to see. I'm looking forward to see what they do with him because he does have some great stuff in the books. And I think they certainly can make use of it because they have brought Sansa to this point.
Yeah, on the other hand, I don't know what they're doing with that whole storyline. It's kind of...
There's bits that involve the marriage and Reek that one would be concerned about. We'll know in the next couple of episodes.
I'd be concerned if they were doing it, frankly, even if it was, you know, if they'd gone with Jane Poole, I'm not sure that...
It would have played...
it's so difficult to read that...
It'd be so difficult. It's so difficult.
I'm not sure. Yeah, and I'm not sure I trust them to handle it well.
George is it can be very tough on characters. It's a very dark storyline, and it's rich in a lot of ways. It's very dark. Next on, we will discuss Podrick and Brienne. So, Podrick and Brienne, you know, I don't have... I mean, it's like 5 minutes, that whole segment of them.
And maybe one of those that feels a little padded.
It's, you know, okay, what they've done is they've taken stories right from the books. Yeah. In Brienne's case, they've adapted a story.
Which gave nice background on the characters.
But I think, especially the Podrick story, like... Yeah. It works better when he's this kid, and he is a child. He's like 12 or 13 years old, and his story is kind of very sad, and it makes. But when Podrick is played as older, and he's this sort of this amiable idiot, he's played very well, but he doesn't. It doesn't. I don't feel a connection. I don't feel like poor kid. I don't. I mean, maybe
they needed that for Brienne to share her story, but I think perhaps they could have worked at it some other way, because Brienne's story, on the other hand, clearly has more importance.
Clearly has a lot more importance to the story going forward this season, because they're clearly focusing
her relationship with Renly, why she followed Renly, why she was in love with Renly, and why she wants vengeance on Stannis, and obviously playing up, as I think we can see now from what several characters have been doing in this episode and the previous episode, that I think this is the season of vengeance.
Yes.
Just like the second was the season of romance. Oh. We saw how well that went.
Yeah, so it does feel a lot, but vengeance is a big thing for a lot of the characters. You've got Arya, you've got now Brienne, you've got...
Eloria.
Yep, Eloria. Sansa. So you have all this vengeance, and you know, as we said...
Which kind of goes very much against the theme of A Feast for Crows, if you're thinking that way, which is more also a very sad aftermath of the wars.
Yeah.
Whereas here's everyone goes
hot, furious.
Let's skip the sad downtime part because that's no fun, and let's go straight into people having vengeance.
Which is it's sort of contrary to people want vengeance all the time in the books. But there are some people who, I mean, there is a clear image, a clear thematic message.
This is thematic in the sense that everyone apparently this season wants vengeance, but
it's saying something opposite of what.
Again, it goes for the actions.
Yes, it's saying the opposite. Like maybe sometime we'll do a video just about adaptation. Because to me, if you're doing a really sort of artistic interpretation and you're really reimagining something, I can kind of go along with it, but they're kind of doing, like, there's little bits and pieces where either they don't get it or they don't like it and they're just going to do their own thing, and there's others where they stay very faithful or fairly faithful, and it feels like
they throw out bits and pieces, sort of. If you want to reimagine something completely and radically and do, you know, the Marxist take on Game of Thrones or whatever, then that's one thing, doing a consistent radical reinterpretation. But cutting out some things, keeping others, missing apparently, that at least the way it looks to us, complete certain themes and nuances and moods entirely, and being controlled too much, not by the needs of the story, but, we like this actor, we want to see more of them. This was popular, we want to give people more of that. How is that serving the story?
No, I mean, we've been complaining about since the second season when they were saying, we love Richard Madden so much, and we had to keep him on screen, and we questioned it then, and you know, we love Richard Madden as well, but we kind of questioned that idea that they were taking away so much of other people's stories to make room for this story, and it's the same thing. I guess that they're still doing some of this. I mean, every time that Varys and Tyrion have a scene where we're arguing with one another, you realize that they love the interactions, and they're great actors, or they do interact well.
Not to say here, I suppose, since we started with Brienne and Podrick, that was
no.
This was clearly setting up. We just
we're on a tangent now.
Yes, we're definitely wandered off.
Let's actually move on. So basically, you know, the scene itself, and also particularly the Renly aspect and Brienne's background, that was cool. But I don't think that. I think they could have trimmed it a little bit. I don't think the Podrick story works as well when he's so much older.
I don't think it really gave what they wanted it to give.
And then the wall. The wall next. So Jon and Stannis are the first they meet up in the Lord Commander's chambers, and Jon says, I'm not going to become Lord of Winterfell, and you can see this disappointment. Now in the books, Stannis kind of is constantly grinding his teeth and really holds it over. He's really put upon by the fact that Jon refused.
I mean, I guess at least he snaps at him about the whole, when he starts talking about when are you leaving,
So Stannis isn't a rager. He doesn't go into rages, but he's
a sulker.
He's a sulker, and he holds things.
He loves his grudges.
Grudges, and he loves chewing over his disappointments and who's to blame.
I mean, I thought it was maybe a little amicable about the whole, with especially giving him advice and such.
Yeah,
that felt a little amicable.
Well, I liked how it was played because Harrington kind of comes up. I mean, Jon Snow comes up kind of like, I'm Lord Commander, I make these decisions, and so I like the fact that he's
more coming into his own.
Davos, I love Liam Kelly, how you could feel very strongly we're just trying to find ways to give him something to do. I wish they had maybe considered giving him more of a storyline from the novels.
It is awkward that they have to keep sort of, okay, now Stannis is going to go off and do something else so that I get to talk for a while.
Yeah. Better still is the scene in the common hall of the Night's Watch, where that was really good. Both the humor we introduced at the latrine pit, where Jon is sort of softening things up a bit, getting the mood up, and then Alistair Thorne, and already the sudden tension of Thorne. First the whole thing, Thorne is kind of thinking he's gonna name me latrine pit captain. And then when he names first Ranger and sort of Thorne's surprise, that was great. A deviation from the books, Blackjack Bulwer gets named first Ranger.
Not appearing in this.
Not appearing in the show, so it's fine.
Yeah.
And then Slint comes off pretty much exactly like in the book. He gives an order. Now, okay, in the book, Jon has a private meeting with various people, and he tells various senior Night's Watchmen, you're going to command this one, you're going to command that one. And then he meets Slint, and he says, you're going to command Greyguard, and Slint refuses, and the whole thing. But then the next morning, when he's supposed to be packed up and ready to go, he's in the common hall with Thorne and various sort of allies, and he's
obviously defying
him.
Yeah. So instead they made it the whole that he gives the order in public and is defied on the spot, which obviously he has to do something about.
Yes, so it works fine. It's compressing it.
Just missing one point.
I missed one little bit, and this is one of the things people. Two little points. One, actually a large point. When George read this chapter before Dance of Dragons was published, it ends with Janos Slint being hung from like 100-foot rope from the top of the wall. It's like a big thing. And people who were listening, read the reading, went to George afterwards like, George, what are you doing? I mean, Jon's a Stark. He's a scion of the First Men. Surely, he remembers what his father said. The man who passes the judgment,
passes the sentence,
to swing the sword. And so, lo and behold, when this chapter is published, Jon starts with the hanging, calls for a noose, and then he stops saying, this is wrong. Wait, Ed, fetch me a block. And here he said, Ollie, get me my sword. I mean, you could have done that and told Ed to fetch him the block. Dolorous Ed has been left like a complete background character. He has not had a line yet.
No, that's
He
true.
shows up. He's the one who goes and sees his Janos Slint. Not a word though the whole time. So I don't know what's going on there. But so I missed that. I missed that.
We have our suspicions where they're playing up Ollie.
Yeah, we have suspicions about Ollie. Some of the things they said about Stannis talking about men of the Night's Watch not happy with the wildlings being around and so on. So, but I think. So I missed those little bits, but the basic story was great. Yeah. Slint's admission that he's always been afraid, that's a new one. He doesn't. I think Slint in the book is disbelieving the entire time.
Yeah.
He can't believe that it's happening. So it was a nice little character beat, I guess. But I liked it. The Wall was a really solid story, and of course a lot of people were hoping for it, and it's there. Stannis witnesses it to the books and gives when Jon looks and sees him watching, he gives him a nod of approval. He approves of how he handled it, and they kept that. So that was they obviously felt that was.
He approved of the exit. Well, I mean, it's both. I don't think it's so much in the books that he necessarily approves of Jon doing it himself, because he's.
But
it's the fact that he was defied in public.
And he took action.
He took action. He didn't back away from it, and that's something he has in common with the Northerners, I guess.
Yeah. So Tyrion and Varys, that's the final segment we're going to discuss.
Final segment of the episode as well.
Final segment of the episode. Volantis, I said, much smaller, not really as grand or fantastical. But, nicely realized with the crowded bridge and the sleeves which are tattoos. The tattoos are much smaller than in the book. In the book, there's some very big tattoos on people's faces.
Yeah, they're marking what the slaves are used for.
Like, one who's like a fool would have like his face entirely tattooed in motley, for example.
The only ones that are subtle, I guess, are the prostitutes.
Well, there's obviously the dung collectors do have like a fly, but yes, the prostitutes do have a tear. Yeah. I like also they kind of did a compression of the sort of the Red Priestess by compressing that. In the book, Tyrion witnesses the high priest of R'hllor in Volantis, in the great temple to the Lord of Light, which is an enormous temple. dwarfs the Great Sept, and he's speaking to a huge crowd of slaves about the savior that's coming, the prince who was promised, and all this stuff. So they've got that.
And a detail there is, of course, that the priesthood of Volantis, of R'hllor, they are all slaves.
Yes.
Whether that is the case
everywhere,
it's unclear whether you're sort of bought by the temple or how it works. But in Volantis, at least, the priesthood is a slave priesthood, and which obviously gives them an affinity with the slaves of the city.
Yeah. So so that's cool. They obviously have squeezed together in the book. This actually, what we see is actually in two different places. We have Silhoris as a Volantine city itself, that is a sort of a vassal or sort of part of the Volantine sort of holdings, and that's where Tyrion arrives with people who are absolutely not Varys, completely set different people. The Sirs not appearing in the story, and goes to a brothel. Where there's a prostitute she's a guy, Danley on his name, who looks like Dany, and is being clearly presented as kind of a lookalike,
which is not uncommon. I don't know if is she presented as a Dany lookalike or just as a Valyrian, because it's not uncommon. I mean, they actually breed for. In this, in particular, they breed for pleasure slaves with the Valyrian look, and they're very popular.
Yeah, so there was talk. I mean, one of the threats one of the Marine slavers Bay against Dany when she's marching is there'll be pleasure houses, and lists will line up to bed the last Targaryen. So there is this whole thing. So that's it, and they discompress it. They put it all into Volantis, which is no problem with that. My problem here actually lies with the way Tyrion behaves, because again...
also with the prostitute who is dressed up as Dany and turns around and has her ass... Yeah, that was just cheesy. Not even cheeky, it was cheesy.
I was going to say, I don't even cheeky, but it was cheesy. It was kind of goofy. But, Tyrion is incredibly messed up after the events of Storm of Swords.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the events of Storm of Swords in the book did not happen on the show.
So a lot of the events didn't. So that might be their explanation. Like, things weren't as bad.
Yeah.
But he's incredibly messed up. He is, even with his complaining. And
he's mostly complaining, actually.
Yeah.
He's not really deeply depressed. He's more like, oh my God, why am I being dragged here, and why do I have to be stuck in this wheelhouse? And
So I think it's, but basically the way when Tyrion gets to the brothel and he gets a prostitute, and remember the prostitutes of Volantis are all slaves, he is very, very unpleasant with her. Incredibly rough. It is a rape. I mean, she is a slave and so, but he doesn't treat her by his own standards. It's a rape because he knows.
He doesn't treat her as a human being. He treats her as a slave.
And he knows. I mean, he's incredibly self-destructive. He's incredibly self-destructive and all. And they've completely stripped that away because I guess they thought it was too heavy or too dark, which is a shame. But it's just part and parcel. They can't do anything to risk Tyrion being unsympathetic.
No.
He's always sympathetic. I don't think there's.
I mean, he has a nice little chit chat here with it.
Yeah, but they go so far away from it by having this kind of funny, sweet talk. I don't like that. I wish they'd be willing to just make a character like Tyrion.
It's just a risk they refuse to take, and it's sad.
I don't mean like I need to see him raping the slave.
But he should
be in a far darker place.
And he should be far grayer than they dare present.
But it's been something they've been doing for a long time. From like the second book, from the second season, they've been stripping away the edges from him as well. I mean, he and Cersei have. Jaime is the one who's been least impacted by this tendency.
That's true.
They can't go and rewrite history and say, oh, he didn't really kill Aerys. If they could have, I'm kind of suspicious that they would have at this point. No, let's say he let everyone else think that he did, but it was actually some...
Well, maybe he tripped and accidentally
fell on the Iron Throne and stabbed himself on the Iron Throne, and then everyone said, when Jaime pulled him off of it, and then they see him, and they think, oh my God, he killed.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's very mean to me, because I know they wouldn't. but it's just, sometimes it feels like the way they
Cersei
treat
and Tyrion, the way they
it makes you feel like maybe they've said, do we really at least you have to imagine someone at HBO say, like, do we really need him to have killed the king? Could we say,
actually, I don't think they have a problem with that. Killing the king is fine, but Cersei plotting to murder people left and right and threatening people in unpleasant ways and all of that, and Tyrion being a horrible, mean sob, that just is too in your face.
Yeah.
Jaime having killed a tyrant in the past, well, that's okay, that's heroic.
So that's it. That's our on the whole. How many eye rolls? We forgot this. I think we calculated 5 eye rolls.
Well, they rolled a lot during the scene with the High Septon. That was an enormous amount of spinning.
When you start realizing the full extent of the sort of stupid little thing of it,
that was definitely a lot of spinning, and I think that they did quite a bit of spinning, not as much, but also for Tommen and Marjorie's interaction, just for being silly.
Yeah. So, but a better episode than the previous two.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought, I recall writing after, in our sort of season 5 version, I thought, these first 4 episodes are maybe sort of the most solid opening 4 that they've had since the first season. And now I've changed my mind, and I think partly is when you get the DVDs and you decide to sort of just watch them all straight through, it minimizes the problems in those first 2 episodes of how slow they were, because you just it's all part of a piece and it feels fine. But when it's broken up over week to week, or you look at it as just a single episode, you realize
the problem is that when you've seen also and you see where some things are going, you kind of you see earlier on what the point of something is, but then it really should be able to stand alone as well. So, and then I think also with the first 2 that it's just the biggest quality that they had was that large parts were inoffensive.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of introduction and not a lot of character moments, not a lot of meat to it. Either character moments or plot movement or thematic things, and now it's improved. And if that, as you can probably hear, Drogon, actually his name is Breeze. Breeze is not happy.
He's objecting strenuously to this review. Alternatively, he agrees with us, but we'll have to wrap here, and we'll see you again next week when we're going to be discussing episode 4, The Sons of the Harpy.